What were the influences in your life that affected the creation of the commandments? How did you come up with the idea? You were only 19, a college sophomore? That's pretty young.
I think there were three influences. My family, some experiences I had that were a little bit unusual, and my understanding of what Good Friday was about. So let me sort of take each of those in turn. I was just very blessed to grow up in the family I grew up in. I mean, good, strong values, and so when I took the Paradoxical Commandments and showed the manuscript to family members, I remember I showed it to my dad. He looked at it and went, "Yeah? Uh-huh. We know this. Nice of you to write it down." I mean, it's the way they were trying to live, the way my aunts and uncles were living. And so I felt like I was not inventing, I was reporting. I was reporting on a way of life, an attitude toward life that was all around me and that I was trying to lead myself. So I wasn't trying to write wisdom. I was just trying to describe, what I was experiencing and what was meaningful in my own life because of my family. There were a couple things that happened to me that were a little unusual that made me think about, well, who am I and what do I stand for, and what am I willing to do? The first one was, I think it was my second month at Roosevelt as a sophomore. The student body officers and senior class officers and everyone decided they wanted to revise the Student Council Constitution to eliminate the representative assembly. So it's like 65 students were participating in the representative assembly. They wanted to eliminate it and just have one council with the student body officers and senior class officers and so on. And I thought, well, that's a terrible idea because, we need to be learning how to be participants and citizens in a democracy. Why would you reduce the participation? So I was really startled that nobody would speak up against it. So finally I did. I thought this was really wrong. And for 5 or 6 weeks, I was the only one in the school of 2,400 students who would stand up against this. So I was pretty lonely. And at one point, they started attacking me. And at one point, they actually made placards and put them on, sticks and picketed. They marched around the courtyard attacking me personally. So when I was 15, I was being picketed. Not everybody has that experience. By the way, we actually won that issue. When it came to a vote, we won and the Constitution was not changed and students continued to participate. I had another experience that was a real learning experience. I was in the Midwest. I just graduated from high school and I was on the staff of a summer student council workshop, and they asked me to give a talk. So here I'd be talking to 200 or 300 students who are going to go back to their student council to be leaders the following year. And I knew quite a bit about student councils at that point, and I knew that they tended to be self-congratulatory cliques, just holding parties for themselves. And I looked at them, I said, you're really a hoax. You're really a fraud. You're pretending to care about the other students. You don't care. You're not doing anything that really helps them, but you could. What if you went back and really listened and really did things that they cared about? You could really change their lives for the better. And they were excited, and they got the message, and they lifted me on their shoulders and carried me out, and we had a great conversation. And then I was surrounded by 4 adults who marched me. They were staff members of the workshop, marched me to my room, told me to pack, put me in the back of a car, drove me 20 miles out of town, dropped me off at a bus stop in the middle of a cornfield at 9:30 at night. So, I had no regrets. I told the truth. I think the students got the message, but it was threatening to the adults. And anyhow, not everybody's picketed when they're 15 or run out of town when they're 18. But those were times where I had to think about, what do I stand for? What's important to me? When am I willing to stand up? And if necessary, am I willing to take a beating as a result? And the answer is yes, I'm willing to do it. So I had experiences that maybe made me grow up a little bit faster than other people did. The third thing, though, which was very specific to the idea of anyway, was coming to a new understanding for myself as to the meaning of Good Friday. I used to just hate thinking about Good Friday. I didn't want to think about Good Friday. On that day, the world did terrible, terrible things to Jesus, and I just want to forget it, jump on to Easter Sunday. And then it finally occurred to me that the story wasn't just about what the world did to Jesus. The story was also about how he responded. And in the face of all that pain and cruelty and hate, he loved people anyway. He saved people anyway. He forgave people anyway. And that was just really a powerful message. The world could not change who he was. He did what he came to do anyway. So that had a big impact on me. And what I took from it was our spiritual life is not so much about what the world does to us. It's about how we respond to what the world does to us, and Jesus was an example. If we respond in ways that are meaningful and authentic to us, then we can still be who we're supposed to do what we're supposed to do. And yeah, that had a big influence on me. So family, some personal experiences, and understanding, a different understanding of Good Friday.
Thank you. You were a student at the time, going to class, taking exams, writing papers. You also had a part-time job. So when did you find time to write a booklet for high school student leaders?
You know, I think there are really two practical factors here. One actually was deciding to write, and then the next one was having the time to write. So when I thought about what I was seeing out in the field and thinking about, gee, you know, a lot of students don't know how to get things done. We taught them the ideals, but you know, how do you implement them? It occurred to me that, you know, maybe people already knew the answer to those questions. You know, there are other books, there are other people. Maybe what I had to say wouldn't be especially valuable, or had already been said. So why should I, what's the point? You know, I wasn't famous for being bashful. I was just trying to be practical. I mean, why should I do this? And I think that's the kind of struggle that a lot of us have in deciding whether or not to do something. And that is, well, we want to have an impact. Actually, we want to have a big impact. And if we aren't sure we're going to have an impact, maybe we just won't do it. And so I struggled with that issue. You know, I'm sitting there in my room, Harvard, I-53, fifth floor, in this little sort of gable-like room with my red Royal Safari manual typewriter, and I'm kind of looking at the wall and looking at my hands and looking at the typewriter and saying, do I really have something to say that would be helpful, you know, would be a contribution? And I finally decided, well, if it helps a few people, only a few people would be enough, that's okay, I'll go ahead and, you know, to use the phrase, I'll do it anyway. But I think that's a kind of struggle in many cases, is deciding to do it all. I actually spent more time deciding whether or not to write than I spent doing the writing. So it was months arguing with myself about whether to do it, more months than when I actually started doing it. But the other factor is having the time. And that's a real dilemma too, because we're all busy. And when you think of something that you'd like to do or you think might be worth doing, it's like, well, I'm already busy, so what do I stop doing to make time for the thing that I want to do next? So I think that's a real struggle for people every day. But it turns out it wasn't a struggle for me at that time. And this is kind of personally embarrassing, but just, you know, in interest of full disclosure. So there I was 19, I was a college sophomore, and I couldn't get a date. I mean, that's not exactly true. I mean, when I was a freshman, I actually did get some dates, but then I spent the evening talking about the meaning of life. And then I couldn't get the next date.
That's when the dates stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I think the girls started talking to each other and word got around, this guy is really boring. He just wants to talk about the meaning of life. So, so there I was in my room on Friday and Saturday night. I had a lot of time just sitting there in my room with my typewriter. So I had the time, and then I decided I would write things. And one of the things I wrote was a booklet for student leaders, and included the Paradoxical Commandments. So, you know, it's pretty humbling to have to admit that, you know, if I'd had a normal social life, I would have never written the Paradoxical Commandments. But I didn't, so I wrote them.
Well, what a gift for us.
Thank you.